The day Elijah Reed touched a fencing foil for the first time, three truths collided. He was born with uncanny reflexes. The sport wasn't meant for kids like him, and impossible dreams make dangerous enemies. At Wilson High, he disappeared into hallway shadows while others collected varsity jackets. But in his backyard, illuminated by moonlight, he transformed, each precise movement challenging generations of exclusion. When Preston Langley, heir to the Westbrook fencing dynasty, saw Elijah's name on the regional roster, his mocking laugh echoed through the country club. His father made a single phone call to ensure the status quo remained undisturbed. What they didn't account for was Mr. Halloway, a forgotten champion with old scores to settle, or Elijah's quiet resolve that had survived years of being invisible. Now, as he adjusted his makeshift mask before his first official match, fingers tightening around a rescued foil patched with electrical tape, Elijah prepared to show them all exactly what happens when you underestimate the boy from the alley. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The final school bell rang across Wilson High, sending students scattering in all directions. While most rushed toward the football field for tryouts, Elijah Reed walked alone, his thin shoulders hunched beneath a worn backpack. The autumn breeze carried the distant cheers and whistles, but Elijah's focus remained on the cracked sidewalk beneath his feet. No one called his name. No one waved him over. At 15, Elijah had mastered the art of invisibility. He pulled a weathered notebook from his jacket pocket and flipped it open. The pages were filled with sketches of figures, in strange poses, lunging, parrying, their arms extended like dancers. To anyone passing by, they might have looked like bizarre stick figures, but to Elijah, they were warriors locked in an ancient dance of precision and control. One day, he whispered to himself as a group of laughing seniors passed without noticing. Him. He quickly closed the notebook when one glanced his way, but the boy's eyes had already moved on, Elijah's presence registering no more than a lamppost would. The walk home took him past manicured lawns and then into his own neighborhood, where chain-link fences surrounded patchy grass and homes with weathered paint. Elijah paused at his mailbox, collecting the usual stack of bills before heading up the cracked concrete path to his front door. Inside, the house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Elijah dropped his backpack by the door and walked to the mantel above their small fireplace. A collection of framed photos stood in neat rows, most featuring a broad-shouldered man with Elijah's same dark eyes and gentle smile, dressed in marine dress blues. "Hey, Dad," Elijah said quietly, touching the frame. Staff Sergeant Marcus. Reed's smile remained frozen in time, never aging beyond the 32 years he'd lived before a training accident took him 4 years ago. The sound of keys in the front door broke the silence. Angela Reed entered, still wearing her hospital scrubs, her hair pulled back in a tight bun that highlighted the tired lines around her eyes. "You're home early," she said, placing her purse on the kitchen counter. "No clubs today?" Elijah shrugged. "Thought I'd get started on homework." Angela nodded, but her eyes lingered on the photo Elijah had been touching. She quickly looked away, busying herself with sorting through the mail. "There's leftover chicken in the fridge," she said. "I've got to head back for the night shift in a few hours, so don't wait up." "Mom," Elijah started, leaning against the kitchen doorframe. "Did Dad ever talk about fencing?" Angela's hands paused on the envelope she was opening. "Fencing? Like putting up fences?" "No, the sport, with swords and stuff." She shook her head, a small crease forming between her eyebrows. "Your father was all about football and boxing." "Why?" "Just wondering," Elijah said, turning away before she could ask more questions. The subject of his father always created an invisible wall between them. Angela preferred to keep Marcus's memory preserved exactly as it was, while Elijah constantly searched for new pieces of the man he'd lost too young. After dinner, Elijah headed outside to get some air. The neighborhood was quiet. Most families settled in for the evening. As he walked down the block, he noticed Mr. Halloway struggling with a section of broken fence that separated his property from the alley. Mr. Halloway was a neighborhood fixture, a tall, thin man with skin like weathered mahogany and a permanent scowl. Kids generally avoided his yard, claiming he yelled at anyone who came too close. But Elijah had never seen him yell, just watched from a distance as the old man tended his immaculate garden or fixed things around his property with methodical precision. "Need some help, sir?" Elijah called, surprising himself with his boldness. Mr. Holloway looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You know how to hammer a nail?" "Yes, sir." "Then get over here and hold this straight while I secure it," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. For the next hour, they worked in relative silence, Elijah following instructions and handing over tools when requested. As they finished securing the last post, Mr. Holloway's toolbox tipped over on the uneven ground, sending a wrench flying toward Elijah's face. Without thinking, Elijah's hand shot up, catching the heavy tool inches from his forehead. The movement was fluid, his balance never shifting despite the sudden motion. Mr. Holloway's eyebrows rose slightly. "Good reflexes," he said, studying Elijah with new interest. "What's your name, boy?" "Elijah Reed, sir. I live 4 houses down." "Marcus Reed's boy?" Elijah nodded, surprised. "You knew my dad?" "Everyone around here knew Marcus," Mr. Holloway said, his voice softening slightly. "Good man. Straight as an arrow." He collected his ISO's tools, then added, "Come by tomorrow if you want to help with the garden gate. I pay in lemonade." The next day after school, Elijah returned as promised. The garden gate turned into cleaning gutters, which led to organizing Mr. Holloway's garage the following weekend. The garage was a treasure trove of mysterious boxes and military memorabilia. Apparently, Mr. Holloway had served in the Army decades earlier. While sorting through a stack of dusty VHS tapes, Elijah came across one without a label. Curious, he asked Mr. Holloway about it. "Old recordings," the man said dismissively. "Take it if you want. Doubt it still works anyway." That night, Elijah dug out their old VCR from the closet and hooked it up to the living room TV. The tape crackled to life, the image fuzzy at first before clearing to reveal a fencing competition, the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. 2 figures, in white suits and mesh masks, moved like dancers across a narrow strip, their foils flashing under the lights. Elijah sat cross-legged on the floor, mesmerized. There was something beautiful about the way they moved, powerful yet controlled, aggressive yet elegant. He stayed up until 2 in the morning, rewinding and rewatching certain sequences, trying to understand the rules and techniques. The next day at school, their gym teacher assigned a project on sports history. Elijah saw his chance and chose fencing, eager to share his newfound interest. He prepared carefully, researching the sport's evolution from dueling to Olympic competition. When his turn came to present, Elijah stood nervously at the front of the class. "Fencing is one of the original Olympic sports," he began, his voice gaining confidence as he described the 3 different weapons, foil, épée, and saber. He demonstrated a basic lunge using a ruler as a makeshift foil. A snicker rippled through the class. Preston Langley, whose father chaired the school board and whose family belonged to the Westbrook Country Club, leaned back in his chair. "Seriously, Reed, sword fighting?" Preston's perfectly styled hair and designer clothes marked him as someone who had never had to catch a city bus or worry about scholarship applications. "That's not for people like you." "That's enough, Preston," the teacher interjected. But the damage was done. Red-faced, Elijah finished his presentation to minimal applause and slid back into his seat. That afternoon, instead of going straight home, Elijah found himself walking toward Westbrook Preparatory Academy, an elite private school on the other side of town. He'd seen a flyer about a public fencing demonstration that afternoon. He wasn't sure why he was going, maybe to prove Preston wrong, or maybe just to see real fencing up close. The Westbrook gym was 3 times the size of Wilson High's, with gleaming floors and state-of-the-art equipment. Elijah slipped in through a side door and found a seat in the back row of bleachers. On the floor below, students in pristine white uniforms and coaches in blazers with the school crest prepared for the demonstration. For an hour, Elijah watched, absorbing every movement and term. The beauty of the sport was even more apparent in person. The discipline, the strategy, the explosive moments of attack and counterattack. When the demonstration ended, he lingered as the crowd dispersed, working up the courage to approach one of the coaches. "Excuse me," he said to a tall man with silver hair who was packing equipment. "How could someone start learning fencing?" The coach looked Elijah up and down, taking in his second-hand clothes and worn sneakers. "We have programs here at Westbrook," he said, "but they're quite selective and expensive." He paused, then added with a dismissive wave, "Black kids don't fence anyway. Maybe try basketball?" The words hit Elijah like a slap. He backed away, bumping into a rack of equipment before hurrying toward the exit. Outside, he leaned against the building, his chest tight with anger and humiliation. As he circled around to leave, he noticed a dumpster behind the gym where staff were tossing equipment. Waiting until they left, Elijah approached and peered inside. Among the discarded gear was a foil with a cracked handle, its tip bent but the blade intact. Without hesitation, he reached in and took it, tucking it under his jacket before walking quickly away. That night, Elijah cleaned the foil carefully with rubbing alcohol and electrical tape, repairing the handle as best he could. He held it in his hand, feeling its weight and balance. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Elijah developed a routine. After finishing homework, he would head to the small backyard, using his phone to watch YouTube tutorials on basic fencing techniques. He taped out a practice strip on the patchy grass and practiced footwork until his legs ached and his shoes were scuffed with dirt. When the foil proved too unwieldy for solo practice, he substituted a wooden mop handle, focusing on form and movement. One evening, Angela came home early and caught him mid-lunge in the backyard. "What in the world are you doing?" she asked, arms crossed. Elijah lowered the mop handle, embarrassed. "Just practicing." "Practicing what? Cleaning the yard with imaginary soap?" "Fencing, Mom. It's a sport." Angela's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Fencing with swords? Where did you even get this idea?" "I saw it on TV. I just thought it looked cool." Angela sighed, noticing the worn spots on his shoes and the developing calluses on his palm. "Elijah, honey, I know you're looking for something that's yours, but this? No one around here plays fencing. It's for rich kids at private schools." "So, I can't even try?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying don't get your hopes up for something that's not practical for us." She touched his shoulder gently. "And be careful. Those bruises on your legs. What if you really hurt yourself?" Elijah nodded, but as soon as his mother went inside, he resumed his practice, now with more determination than before. 2 days later, Mr. Halloway caught him practicing behind the house. Instead of walking away, the old man stood watching with an inscrutable expression. "Your footwork's all wrong," he finally said. Elijah froze mid-step. "Sir? You're lunging too deep. You'll strain your knee that way." Mr. Halloway approached, his movement surprisingly fluid for a man his age. "Square your shoulders. Front foot pointed at your target, back foot perpendicular." "You know fencing?" Elijah asked, amazed. Mr. Halloway's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Wait here," he said, turning toward his house. When he returned, he carried a leather-bound book and what looked like a real fencing mask, aged but intact. "Army Fencing Team, 1970 to 1975, he said, handing Elijah the book. "We weren't the Olympics, but we were good enough to make the other branches nervous." Elijah opened the book to find handwritten notes, diagrams, and newspaper clippings documenting matches and techniques. In one faded photo, a young Mr. Halloway stood proudly with a team of men in uniform, holding fencing foils. "You're serious about this?" Mr. Halloway asked, eyes narrowed. "Yes, sir." "Then come by tomorrow after school. We'll start with the basics, the real way, not that internet nonsense you've been copying." The next afternoon, Elijah arrived at Mr. Halloway's house promptly at 4. The backyard had been transformed. A straight line of white paint marked a crude strip on the lawn, and 2 wooden posts stood at each end. "First things first," Mr. Halloway said, emerging from the back door. Forget everything you think you know. For the next 2 hours, Mr. Holloway drilled Elijah on stance and footwork. No foils, no fancy moves, just the fundamental positions and steps that formed the foundation of fencing. By the end, Elijah's legs trembled from holding the same position for minutes at a time, but he didn't complain. "Same time tomorrow," Mr. Holloway said, dismissing him. "And stretch tonight, or you'll be too sore to continue." Days turned into weeks. Their training sessions became a daily ritual, always after school and always in secret. Mr. Holloway was a demanding teacher, exacting, often critical, but never cruel. He emphasized discipline over flash, fundamentals over tricks. Fencing isn't about who has the fanciest equipment or the most expensive lessons, he told Elijah. It's about who has the strongest mind and the most disciplined body. When Elijah wasn't training with Mr. Holloway, he converted the alley behind his house into a practice area. He taped down lines to mark distances, set up targets on the fence, and practiced his footwork until the neighbors became accustomed to the sight of him lunging and retreating in the evening shadows. Some watched from their windows, curious but distant. Others whispered when he passed, the strange boy playing with swords in the alley. No one interfered. 3 weeks into his training, Elijah was practicing alone when he sensed someone watching. He turned to find a girl from his school standing at the edge of the alley, her arms full of what looked like electronic parts. "Don't stop because of me," she said, shifting the pile of components in her arms. "It looked like you were in the middle of something important." Elijah recognized her as Tina Alvarez, a sophomore known for rewiring the school's weather station to also track air pollution levels, a project that had gotten her both detention and a feature in the local paper. She wasn't popular exactly, but she was respected for her brilliance with anything electronic. "It's just practice," Elijah said, lowering his foil. Tina stepped closer, examining his setup with interest. "Fencing, right? I saw your presentation in gym class." She tilted her head, studying his stance. "You're actually pretty good. How long have you been training?" "A few weeks. Really just started." "Seriously? You move like you've been doing it longer." She set down her pile of parts on a nearby crate. "So this is where you disappear to after school? Everyone thought you joined some secret club or something." Elijah tensed. "Are you going to tell people?" Tina laughed. "What? That you're secretly becoming a swordmaster in an alley? No one would believe me anyway." She picked up a small circuit, board from her pile. "Actually, I might be able to help you." "How?" "I've been working on this pressure-sensitive project for the science fair. With some modifications, I could make you a scoring system. You know, like they use in real competitions. To track hits." Elijah's eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "Why?" Tina shrugged. "Because it's interesting, and because it would annoy Preston Langley, which is always a bonus in my book." She held out her hand. "Deal. I keep your secret and you let me help with your training setup." They shook on it, and just like that, Elijah had his first ally. True to her word, Tina returned 3 days later with a makeshift scoring system, a box with lights and a counter, connected to a vest she'd rigged with conductive material. "It's not competition grade," she explained, helping him attach wires to his foil. "But it'll register when you make contact with the target areas and keep track of points." The system transformed Elijah's practice. Now he could work on accuracy as well as form, targeting specific areas and receiving immediate feedback. Tina often sat on a nearby crate, tinkering with other projects while offering occasional commentary on his technique. Mr. Holloway was skeptical of the electronic additions at first, but begrudgingly admitted they were useful for solo practice. His focus remained on the mental aspects of fencing, reading opponents, maintaining focus, and developing strategy. "A good fencer is a chess player who can sprint," he told Elijah. "You need to think 10 moves ahead while reacting in the moment." After 6 weeks of training, Mr. Holloway decided it was time for Elijah to face a real opponent. He arranged a sparring match with a former student, Kyle, a college dropout who had fenced recreationally for years. They met in Mr. Holloway's backyard on a Saturday morning. Kyle arrived with professional equipment and a confident smirk that faltered slightly when he saw Elijah's perfect stance. "Remember," Mr. Holloway told Elijah quietly. He has more experience, but you have heart. Watch his shoulders, not his blade. The body telegraphs before the weapon moves. The match was brief, but intense. Kyle's technical skills were superior, and he scored 5 points to Elijah's 2. But in those 2 points, Elijah showed flashes of natural talent, an instinctive sense of timing and distance that couldn't be taught. Not bad, kid, Kyle said afterward, removing his mask. You've got potential, rough around the edges, but there's something there. That night, Elijah returned home exhausted but exhilarated. The feeling of actual combat, even in friendly sparring, had ignited something in him. This wasn't just practice anymore. It was real. He was so absorbed in replaying the match in his mind that he didn't notice his mother standing in his doorway until she spoke. Care to explain this? Angela held up his worn-down sneakers, the soles nearly separated from the upper. Next to them was his foil, which he'd forgotten to hide in his rush to shower. Mom, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been sneaking around for weeks? That you've ruined another pair of shoes we can barely afford? Her voice wasn't angry, so much as worried. Elijah, what are you thinking? Before Elijah could answer, a knock at the front door interrupted them. Angela went to answer it, returning moments later with Mr. Holloway behind her. Ms. Reed, Mr. Holloway said formally, I believe I owe you an explanation about your son's activities. For the next hour, Mr. Holloway sat at their kitchen table, telling Angela about his time in the Army, his fencing experience, and how he'd been training Elijah. Your boy has real talent, he said. The kind you can't teach. I wouldn't waste my time otherwise. But fencing? Angela shook her head. It's not exactly accessible for someone in our situation. It wasn't accessible for me either, until a sergeant saw something in me worth developing, Mr. Holloway replied. Sometimes the path finds you, not the other way around. Angela looked at Elijah, who had been silent throughout the exchange. Is this really what you want? Yes, Elijah said simply. More than anything, Angela sighed. Then I won't stand in your way. But no more secrets, understand? And we need to figure out the equipment situation. I can't keep buying new shoes every month. After Mr. Holloway left, Angela pulled Elijah into a tight hug. You remind me so much of your father sometimes, she whispered. He never took the easy path either. What Elijah didn't know was that his journey had already begun to spread beyond their neighborhood. Without telling him, Tina had been recording short clips of his training sessions and duels. She edited them carefully, never showing his face clearly, and uploaded them to a sports channel under the username Masked Kid Fencing. The early videos gained modest attention in niche fencing forums, but when she posted footage of Elijah's duel with Kyle, focusing on his 2 successful points, the video caught fire. Something about his unconventional style and raw talent resonated with viewers. Coaches and fencers began emailing the account, asking who the mysterious masked kid was and where he trained. Tina responded vaguely, protecting Elijah's identity, while feeding the growing interest. One evening, as Elijah was finishing a training session with Mr. Holloway, Tina arrived looking unusually excited. You need to see this, she said, thrusting her tablet into his hands. On the screen was an email from an anonymous sender with the subject line, Underground Invitation. The message was brief. To the masked kid, your style has caught attention. There's a meet this Saturday, 8 p.m. at the old Millworks building downtown. Low stakes, good competition. Come mask up and show what you've got. Password, Touche. What is this? Elijah asked, looking up from the tablet. An underground fencing meet, Tina explained. Not official, obviously, but these things happen in all sports. People who want to compete outside the system, former college athletes, people who can't afford club memberships, sometimes even coaches testing new techniques. Is it safe? Mr. Holloway asked, his expression concerned. From what I've researched, yes, Tina said. They're just fencers looking for matches outside the traditional circuit. Some compete for small cash prizes, others just for reputation. Elijah looked at Mr. Holloway, waiting for his verdict. The old man was quiet for a moment. It's not ideal, he finally said, but it would give you real match experience against different styles. Something you can't get just sparring with Kyle. or practicing drills. So I should go? Elijah asked. We should go, Mr. Holloway corrected. I'm not sending you alone to your first underground anything. Saturday evening arrived with a mix of rain and nerves. Tina had enhanced Elijah's mask with subtle LED accents along the mesh. To maintain the masked kid mystique, she explained. Mr. Holloway drove them to the millworks in his ancient Buick, parking a block away to avoid drawing attention. The old factory had been partially converted into artist studios, but the back section remained untouched. A single door, marked only with a small blue tape X, led them into a cavernous space lit by industrial lights. In the center, 2 regulation strips had been laid out on the concrete floor, surrounded by folding chairs and makeshift bleachers. About 30 people milled around, a diverse crowd ranging from college-aged to middle-aged, some in proper fencing, gear, others in adapted equipment similar to Elijah's. In one corner, a man with a tablet was taking names and organizing brackets. Password? He asked when they approached. Touché, Mr. Holloway replied. The man nodded, then looked at Elijah. This the masked kid? Younger than I expected. He handed Elijah a number to pin to his jacket. You're in the second bracket. Warm, up wherever you can find space. As they moved away, Elijah whispered to Tina, How many people have seen those videos? Enough, she replied with a small smile. Don't worry, they still don't know who you are. Elijah's first opponent was a wiry man in his 20s with lightning-fast reflexes. The match was close, with Elijah losing by 2 points. But his second match, against a technically proficient but predictable opponent, ended in a surprising victory. The small crowd, initially skeptical of the young newcomer, began to pay attention. His third match was against a local favorite, a former collegiate fencer known for aggressive attacks. The atmosphere tensed as they saluted and took their positions. Remember what we practiced, Mr. Holloway said quietly. Let him come to you. Use his momentum. The match began intensely, with the opponent scoring 2 quick points. But Elijah remained calm, falling into the rhythm of movement that now felt like second nature. He scored his first point with a perfectly timed parry riposte, causing murmurs in the crowd. As the match progressed, Elijah found a strange clarity settling over him. Time seemed to slow. He could see the patterns in his opponent's movements, the slight tells before each attack. By the final point, Elijah was no longer reacting. He was anticipating, meeting the older fencer's aggressive lunge with a sidestep and precise counterattack. The buzzer sounded. Final score, 5-4, Elijah's victory. The crowd broke into applause. Not the polite golf clapping of official tournaments, but genuine appreciation for what they'd witnessed. Several fencers approached, offering congratulations and asking about his training. You've got something special, kid, one woman told him. Don't let the establishment tell you otherwise. On the drive home, Mr. Holloway was unusually quiet. Finally, as they pulled up to Elijah's house, he said, You know, they'll notice you now. The official circuit. Word travels. Is that good? Or bad? Elijah asked. Both, Mr. Holloway answered. They'll want you for your talent, but they'll resist you for everything else. The question is, are you ready for that fight? Elijah looked down at his hands, still feeling the phantom weight of the foil. Yes, he said. I think I am. The morning after his underground victory, Elijah woke to Tina calling his phone repeatedly. He answered groggily, still sore from the previous night's matches. Check your email, she said without greeting. Now. Elijah fumbled for his laptop and opened his inbox. At the top sat an unread message with the subject line, Invitation, Regional Youth Fencing League. Is this real? He asked, suddenly, wide awake. Very real, Tina replied. Someone from last night must have connections. The regional qualifier is in 3 weeks at Westbrook Prep. They want you there. Elijah read the email twice, his heart racing. This wasn't some underground meet. This was official, sanctioned competition, the first step toward state and even national recognition. I have to tell Mr. Holloway, he said, already pulling on a sweatshirt. Already did, Tina answered. He says to meet at his place at 10. And Elijah? This is it. This is what we've been working for. Mr. Holloway was waiting on his porch when Elijah arrived, the invitation printed and laid out on a small table beside him. So, the old man said, his expression unreadable. You ready to step into their world? I think so. But, Elijah hesitated. The entry fee is $200. Plus we need regulation equipment. Mr. Holloway nodded slowly. Let me worry about that. You focus on training. The rules will be stricter than what you're used to, and the judges won't be as forgiving of your unconventional style. When Elijah told his mother about the invitation that evening, her reaction was mixed. Pride shone in her eyes, but worry creased her forehead. Honey, that's amazing, but we need to be practical. The travel alone would be difficult. And the equipment? Mr. Holloway has connections, Elijah said quickly. And Tina's working on adapting my scoring system to regulation standards. We can make it work. Angela studied her son's face, the determination in his eyes so reminiscent of his father's. You really want this, don't you? More than anything, Mom. She sighed, then smiled slightly. Then we'll figure it out. I can pick up an extra shift or two. Maybe we can set up a fundraiser at the hospital. What neither of them knew was that, across town, in an elegant home overlooking the Westbrook golf course, Preston Langley's father was reviewing the same competition roster. Charles Langley frowned at his computer screen, his brow furrowing as he spotted Elijah's name among the entrants. Preston, he called to his son, who was lounging on the sofa nearby. Do you know an Elijah Reed? Preston looked up from his phone. Reed? Yeah, some nobody from Wilson High. Why? He's registered for the regional qualifier. Preston snorted. In fencing? No way. He probably doesn't even have proper equipment. Charles Langley's expression darkened. Well, he's entered, and based on this note from the organizer, he's got some sort of underground reputation. He turned to his son. I want you to watch him closely at the qualifier. The last thing we need is some untrained hotshot making a mockery of the sport. 3 weeks passed in a blur of intense training. Mr. Holloway pushed Elijah harder than ever, focusing on official rules and protocols. Tina modified his equipment to meet regulation standards, though it still looked patched together compared to the professional gear others would have. The morning of the qualifier arrived with a knot of anxiety in Elijah's stomach. Angela drove him to Westbrook Prep, the same school where he'd been dismissed months earlier. Now he was returning as a competitor. The campus was crowded with fencers and their families, most dressed in matching team uniforms with expensive equipment. Bags. Elijah clutched his own bag, a repurposed gym duffel containing his mask, foil, and the jacket Mr. Holloway had found through an old Army connection. Remember, Mr. Holloway said as they approached the check-in table, you belong here as much as anyone. Don't let them tell you different. As the volunteer checked Elijah's name against the roster, a tall man in a blazer with the Westbrook crest approached. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Elijah's worn sneakers and second-hand equipment. Mr. Reed, he said, his tone cool. I'm Director Phillips. We'll need to verify your equipment before you can compete. Standard procedure. Mr. Holloway stepped forward. His equipment meets all regulations, we made sure of it. Nevertheless, Phillips replied, we need to check personally, especially for non-club trained participants. The inspection took nearly twice as long as it did for other competitors. Every item was scrutinized, but eventually they had to admit everything, though old, met the minimum requirements. As Elijah headed toward the warm-up area, he felt eyes following him. Among the stairs, he spotted Preston Langley watching with undisguised contempt. Ignore him, Tina whispered. Focus on what we came here to do. The competition hall was arranged with 6 fencing strips, each with its own scoring system and referee. Elijah's first match was scheduled on Strip 3 against a fencer from an established club in the suburbs. As he performed his warm-up stretches, Elijah tried to recall everything Mr. Holloway had taught him about formal competition etiquette. The proper salute, when to put on his mask, where to stand while waiting, 1,000 small rules he'd never needed in the alley behind his house. When his name was called, Elijah approached the strip, saluted his opponent and the referee, and took his position. The moment the referee called fence, all his training crystallized. The noise of the crowd faded away as he focused entirely on his opponent. But something was wrong. The timing felt off. Movements that had flowed naturally in practice now felt stiff and forced. Every time Elijah attempted one of his unconventional counters, the referee called a halt, citing infractions Elijah didn't fully understand. His opponent, sensing the advantage, pressed forward with textbook attacks that scored point after point. The final score was 5-1, a decisive defeat that left Elijah stunned. As he walked back to where Mr. Holloway and Tina waited, he heard murmurs from the crowd. Just a backyard fencer. No real training. Doesn't belong here. What happened out there? Elijah asked, removing his mask. I couldn't get anything to work. Mr. Holloway's expression was grim. They're calling your style incorrect. Not because it doesn't work, but because it doesn't follow their rigid patterns. He placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. This is what I warned you about. Their world has rules designed to keep outsiders out. Elijah sat alone during the lunch break, watching other matches with growing despair. Every competitor seemed to move in the same polished, predictable way. Effective but identical, as if they'd all learned from the same manual. Maybe they're right, he said when Tina found him. Maybe I'm just a backyard fencer who doesn't belong here. That's exactly what they want you to think, Tina replied fiercely. Mr. Holloway didn't train you to win popularity contests. He trained you to fight for your space in the world. Before Elijah could respond, a voice interrupted them. Your weight distribution is wrong. Elijah looked up to see a girl about his age standing before them. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her equipment bag bore the insignia of an elite academy. Excuse me, he said, in your match. Your weight was too far forward in your stance. Makes you predictable. She spoke matter-of-factly, her expression neutral. I'm Naoko Ito. Elijah recognized the name immediately. Naoko was one of the top-ranked junior fencers in the region, known for her technical precision and competitive intensity. Elijah Reed, he replied cautiously. I know who you are. Everyone's talking about the mysterious backyard fencer. She studied him critically. You're not as bad as they're saying. Your problem isn't lack of skill, it's that you're fighting. They're game by their rules. With that cryptic comment, she turned and walked away, leaving Elijah staring after her. Did she just help me? He asked Tina. I think so. But more importantly, she's been studying you, Tina said thoughtfully. Which means you caught her attention. That afternoon, Elijah met with Mr. Holloway between matches. Together, they watched videos of his first bout, analyzing what had gone wrong. You need to adapt, Mr. Holloway said. Not abandon your style, but refine it. Make it work within their framework without losing what makes it powerful. For hours, they studied footage of both Elijah's match and those of more successful competitors. Mr. Holloway pointed out subtle differences in timing, positioning, and the execution of attacks. Remember, the old man said, the rules define the boundaries of the game, but not how you play within them. Elijah's second match came the following day against the same opponent he'd lost to previously. This time, he approached the strip with new understanding. Instead of trying to force his unorthodox style through, he blended it with more conventional techniques. When his opponent attacked with the same patterns as before, Elijah was ready. He parried the familiar strikes and countered with controlled responses that satisfied the referee's expectations while maintaining his unique timing and distance. The crowd grew silent as the score mounted, 1-1, then 2-1 Elijah, then 3-2, 4-2, and finally 5-3. A clear victory. As the referee announced the tie-it final score, scattered applause broke out. Elijah removed his mask to see Mr. Holloway nodding with grim satisfaction and Tina beaming. Even Naoko, watching from the sidelines, gave a small nod of acknowledgement. After the match, several other competitors approached Elijah, their initial skepticism replaced by genuine interest in his background and training. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging in this world, but not everyone was pleased with his success. That evening, as Elijah and Tina reviewed scoring data from the day's matches, she noticed something troubling. "This doesn't make sense," she said, frowning at her tablet. "I've been tracking the scoring patterns for all competitors, and there's a statistical anomaly." She showed Elijah a series of charts. "See here? In matches involving minority fencers, the scoring patterns show a subtle but consistent bias. Touches that should count are being registered as off-target or invalid." "Are you saying the scoring is rigged?" Elijah asked, incredulous. "Not rigged exactly. More like unconsciously biased. The judges are making split-second decisions that consistently favor certain competitors." She continued scrolling through the data. "The question is, what do we do with this information?" Before they could discuss further, they heard raised voices from the officials' room. Mr. Holloway emerged moments later, his face tight with anger. "What happened?" Elijah asked. "Charles Langley happened," Mr. Holloway replied. "They're trying to introduce a new policy limiting non-club trained participants in the finals, claiming it's about maintaining standards." "Can they do that?" "They're certainly trying. I just spent 20 minutes reminding them about equal opportunity regulations." Mr. Holloway's expression softened slightly. "Don't worry, this isn't my first fight against people who think they own a sport." The tension at the tournament was palpable the next morning. Whispers followed Elijah through the venue, and several officials watched him with undisguised scrutiny. To his surprise, Naoko approached him during warm-ups. "You're being watched," she said without preamble. "Every referee has been briefed to check your form extra carefully." "How do you know that?" Elijah asked. "My coach overheard Langley talking to the head official." She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "Look, I don't care about the politics, but I care about fair competition. Meet me at the practice strips in an hour. I'll show you what they'll be looking for." True to her word, Naoko spent a full hour drilling Elijah on the fine points of competition rules and how judges interpreted them. Despite her initially cold demeanor, she proved to be a patient teacher, demonstrating how to modify his movements to avoid penalties without losing effectiveness. "You read opponents well," she admitted grudgingly. "Most fencers just focus on physical tells, but you catch the psychological ones too. Don't lose that." "Why are you helping me?" Elijah finally asked. Naoko paused, her expression difficult to read. "Because I used to think like them, that only certain people belonged in fencing. Then my coach pointed out that my own Japanese grandparents faced the same prejudice." She adjusted her grip on her foil. "Besides, if you're going to lose, it should be because you're outfenced, not because the system is against you." As they practiced, Elijah noticed Tina sitting nearby, unusually quiet as she worked on her tablet. When Naoko left to prepare for her own match, he sat down beside his friend. "Everything okay?" Tina hesitated. "I got an email this morning." She showed him her screen, an acceptance letter from MIT for a summer innovation camp, complete with a full scholarship. "It starts in 3 weeks." "Tina, that's amazing," Elijah exclaimed. "Why didn't you tell me you applied?" "I didn't think I'd get in, and then everything with your fencing started taking off and—" She shrugged. "I didn't want you to think I was abandoning the team. Are you kidding? This is MIT, you have to go." Elijah bumped her shoulder with his. "Besides, you've already built everything I need. I'll manage." Tina smiled, relieved. "Thanks, but don't think you're getting rid of me yet. We still have a tournament to win." That afternoon, Elijah faced his most challenging opponent yet, a senior from an established academy with years of formal training. The match drew a larger crowd than usual, word having spread about the unconventional newcomer. Elijah fought brilliantly, applying everything he'd learned from Mr. Holloway and Naoko. The score remained tight throughout, with neither fencer gaining more than a 1-point advantage. At 4-4, the tension in the hall was electric. The final exchange was a blur of movement. Attack, parry, riposte, counter-riposte. When the scoring light flashed, indicating Elijah's touch had landed. A mix of cheers and gasps erupted from the crowd. As Elijah removed his mask, flushed with victory, a voice cut through the applause. "Check his equipment." That point couldn't have registered properly. An older man, well-dressed and bearing a strong resemblance to Preston, was on his feet, pointing accusingly at Elijah. The referee frowned but gestured for an equipment check. Finding nothing irregular, he confirmed the final score. Elijah had won fairly. As he stepped off the strip, the man approached him. Other parents and coaches watching the confrontation. "Who verified your age registration?" he demanded. "Where are your credentials? Boys from your background have been known to falsify documents." The accusation hung in the air, its implication unmistakable. Before Elijah could respond, Mr. Holloway stepped between them. "That's enough, Langley," he said, his voice low but carrying. "The boy won fair and square. Take it like a man." Charles Langley's face reddened. "This isn't over, Holloway. Fencing has standards to maintain." As the crowd dispersed, murmuring uncomfortably, Elijah's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Call me immediately." Stepping outside, he dialed her number. Angela answered on the first ring, her voice tight with stress. "Mom, what's wrong? I've been suspended pending investigation," she said. "Someone found discrepancies in patient records under my access code, medications that weren't administered, documentation errors. They're saying it could be grounds for termination." Elijah's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. You're the most careful nurse they have." "I know. It doesn't make any sense." She paused. "How's the tournament going?" "It's complicated." Elijah hesitated, not wanting to add to her worries. "I'm doing well, but there's some pushback." "From who?" "Just some parent. Charles Langley." The line went silent for a moment. "Langley, as in Westbrook Hospital Board Langley?" "I think so." "Why?" "Because he's on the oversight committee for the hospital too." Angela's voice hardened. "Elijah, be careful. If he's behind this..." "I will, Mom. And don't worry about the hospital. We'll figure it out." When he returned inside, Tina was waiting with her tablet. "You need to see this." She showed him a breakdown of the tournament brackets. "Notice anything strange about Preston's path?" Elijah studied the diagram. "His opponents have all been lower-ranked competitors." "Exactly. The statistical probability of him getting this bracket by random draw is less than 3%. Someone's manipulating the matchups." Before they could discuss further, a commotion near the bleachers caught their attention. People were gathering around. Someone who had collapsed. "Mr. Holloway," Elijah gasped, recognizing the figure slumped over on the bench. He rushed over, pushing through the crowd to find his mentor pale and disoriented, one side of his face drooping slightly. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. Naoko was already on her phone, giving the dispatcher their location. "Elijah," Mr. Holloway managed, his speech slurred. "Langley confronted me. Got too worked up." Paramedics arrived minutes later. As they loaded Mr. Holloway into the ambulance, he gripped Elijah's hand. "Don't stop now," he whispered. "Too close." Elijah stood watching as the ambulance pulled away, its sirens cutting through the afternoon quiet. Tina and Naoko flanked him silently, offering wordless support. "He had a stroke," a paramedic had confirmed before leaving. "But they caught it quickly. That's good." The remainder of the day passed in a blur. Elijah withdrew from his final match, unable to focus after Mr. Holloway's collapse. Tina insisted on going to the hospital with him while Angela finished her shift. They found Mr. Holloway in a private room, conscious but weak. His face still showed signs of the stroke, but his eyes brightened when he saw them. "You should be competing," he said to Elijah. "There'll be other tournaments," Elijah replied. "You're more important." Mr. Holloway gestured weakly toward a bag beside his bed. "Brought journal for you." Tina retrieved the weathered leather journal, the same one Mr. Holloway had shown Elijah months ago when revealing his fencing past. "Study it," Mr. Holloway said. "Everything I know is there." As evening fell, more visitors arrived. To Elijah's surprise, Nyoko appeared with a small bouquet of flowers. She nodded to him silently before placing them on the windowsill. "The fencing community is talking," she told them quietly. "About Mr. Holloway, about you, about Langley. People are taking sides." "What side are you on?" Elijah asked directly. Nyoko met his gaze steadily. "The side of the sport, which means against anyone who tries to keep others out of it." Later that night, after everyone had gone, Elijah sat alone in Mr. Holloway's hospital room, the old journal open in his lap. He'd been paging through it, absorbing decades of fencing wisdom and personal reflections. Near the back, a yellowed newspaper clipping caught his eye. The headline read, "Military Fencing Championship Ends in Controversy. Holloway Disqualified." The article detailed accusations of rule violations against a young James Holloway during the 1978 Inter-Service Championships. Though witnesses disputed the violations, officials upheld the disqualification, ending his competitive career. A handwritten note in the margin simply stated, "They couldn't beat me fairly, so they changed the rules." Further down the page, in writing that seemed more recent, Mr. Holloway had added, "History repeats. Watch the Langleys. They've controlled regional fencing for 3 generations. Will do anything to maintain it." As Elijah closed the journal, his phone buzzed with a notification. Tina had forwarded him an email that had been leaked online, from Charles Langley to several tournament directors and board members. The message was carefully worded but unmistakable in its intent. Concerns about maintaining the image and standards of the sport, and the need to carefully vet participants without traditional backgrounds. One line stood out starkly. "Fencing has always been a sport of discipline and tradition. We cannot allow it to be cheapened by those who haven't paid their dues through proper channels." Elijah sat in the dim hospital room, the steady beeping of monitors the only sound as he held Mr. Holloway's journal in one hand and his phone displaying Langley's email in the other. Something hardened in him. Not anger exactly, but resolve. "I'm going to make them remember," he whispered to his unconscious mentor, who they tried to erase. The week following Mr. Holloway's stroke brought changes Elijah wasn't prepared for. With his mentor in recovery and the regional tournament behind him, he faced a new challenge, moving forward without his guiding hand. Though he'd qualified for state-level competition, the path ahead seemed suddenly uncertain. 3 days after Mr. Holloway's hospitalization, Elijah was practicing alone in the alley behind his house when a silver Lexus pulled up. A tall, silver-haired man in a navy blazer stepped out, watching Elijah's movements with critical interest. "Your extension is good," the man said, "but your recovery is too slow. Makes you vulnerable to a counter." Elijah lowered his foil. "Can I help you?" "Robert Donovan." The man extended his hand. "I coached the Olympic development team until my retirement last year." Recognition flickered in Elijah's eyes. "You're Coach Donovan? From the 2016 games?" "The same." Donovan glanced around at Elijah's makeshift training area with a mixture of curiosity and dismay. Word travels fast in fencing circles. The backyard fencer who qualified for state is all anyone's talking about. When I heard about James Holloway's stroke, I thought I'd see for myself. "You know Mr. Holloway?" "We competed against each other decades ago. Different leagues, but same circuit." Donovan crossed his arms. "I'm offering to work with you until the state championships. No charge." Elijah's initial excitement quickly faded as the first training session with Donovan made it clear their approaches couldn't be more different. Where Mr. Holloway had embraced Elijah's unconventional style and helped refine it, Donovan seemed determined to remake him entirely. "Forget everything Holloway taught you," Donovan instructed during their second session. His style was always too unorthodox. It might work against amateurs, but at higher levels, you need technical perfection. "But my style is what got me this far," Elijah protested. "And it won't take you any further," Donovan replied firmly. "These backyard tactics might have surprise value, but state-level competitors will dissect and exploit them. Trust me, I've been coaching champions while Holloway's been fixing fences." Despite his reservations, Elijah tried to adapt to Donovan's methods. The coach was undeniably knowledgeable, and his drills were precise and effective. But with each session, Elijah felt something essential slipping away, the intuitive, fluid quality that had defined his fencing. After a particularly frustrating practice, Naoko found Elijah sitting alone on the school bleachers, staring at his foil. "You look like someone stole your soul," she said, sitting beside him. "Donovan wants me to change everything, says my style is too street for serious competition." Naoko considered this. "I watched videos of your early matches. There's something distinctive in how you fence, unpredictable, adaptable. Donovan wants to make you technically perfect, but that would make you just like everyone else." She fixed him with a direct gaze. "And easier for Preston to beat." "You think I should ignore an Olympic coach?" Elijah asked incredulously. "I think you should take his technical knowledge without losing what makes you special." She stood, gathering her equipment bag. "My grandfather always says that true mastery isn't copying others, but finding your own path within tradition." As Nyoko's words settled, another concern pressed on Elijah's mind. That evening, he met Tina at their usual spot in the local library, where they'd been preparing for upcoming competitions. She seemed distracted, repeatedly checking her phone. "Everything okay?" he asked finally. Tina hesitated, then slid an envelope across the table. "I got the official welcome packet from MIT. The summer program starts in 2 weeks." "That's fantastic," Elijah said, genuinely happy for her despite the knot forming in his stomach. "Why do you look like you're delivering bad news?" "Because I feel like I'm abandoning ship right when things are getting serious. First Mr. Holloway, now me." She fidgeted with her tablet. "All the analytics systems we built, the training programs, will still be here," Elijah finished for her. "Tina, you've already done more than I could have asked for. This is your dream." "What about your dream?" she asked quietly. "Still chasing it," he assured her, just with a few more detours than expected. Later that night, Elijah visited Mr. Holloway in the hospital. The old man was making slow progress, now able to speak more clearly though still weak on his left side. "Donovan's coaching you?" Mr. Holloway asked when Elijah mentioned the development. "Surprised he'd leave his country. Club students. He says he's doing it as a favor to the sport," Elijah replied. "But he wants me to fence like everyone else, drop everything that makes my style different." Mr. Holloway's eyes narrowed. "And what do you think?" "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just being stubborn, holding on to something that won't work at higher levels." The old man was silent for a moment, then gestured toward the drawer beside his bed. "There's an envelope in there. Was saving it for later, but you need it now." Elijah retrieved a sealed envelope with his name written on it in Mr. Holloway's precise handwriting. Inside was a letter dated months earlier, shortly after they'd begun training. "Elijah, if you're reading this, it means you've reached a crossroads in your fencing journey. I've seen enough promising fighters falter at this stage to know the pitfall you're facing, the temptation to conform, to trade your natural gifts for technical approval. True mastery isn't about copying others, but owning your origin. The techniques I've taught you weren't learned in fancy academies, but in makeshift training rooms on military bases, where we had to adapt official methods to our own strengths. Remember, they will try to make you believe there's only one right way to fence. That's how systems maintain control, by defining the acceptable path so narrowly that outsiders can never truly belong. Your greatest strength is that you don't fence like them. Don't surrender that advantage for their approval. James Holloway." Elijah read the letter twice, something settling in his chest. When he looked up, Mr. Holloway was watching him closely. "You knew this would happen," Elijah said. "History repeats," the old man replied simply. "Question is, what will you do about it?" The answer came sooner than expected. The next morning, Elijah awoke to his phone buzzing with notifications. Someone had leaked edited clips of his early matches online, manipulated to make it appear he had broken rules repeatedly without penalties. The caption accused tournament officials of lowering standards to accommodate unqualified diversity candidates. By midday, the state fencing board had announced an investigation into his qualification matches. Donovan called to cancel their practice, citing the unfortunate controversy. "This is a coordinated attack," Tina fumed as they huddled around, her laptop in Elijah's living room. "The editing is obvious to anyone who knows video, but they're counting on creating enough doubt to justify disqualifying you. Can you prove it's fake?" Elijah asked. "Better than that. I can trace who uploaded it." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. The account looks anonymous, but they were sloppy with their digital footprint. 3 hours later, Tina had compiled conclusive evidence that the videos had been uploaded from a device registered to Ryan Langley, Preston's cousin and, coincidentally, an intern with the State Fencing Association's media team. With Nyoko's encouragement, they took their findings directly to a senior board member who had shown fairness throughout the tournament. The investigation was dropped with a terse public statement, but the damage to the system's credibility was done. Social media buzzed with discussions about bias in fencing competition, with many sharing their own experiences of exclusion. The evening after the controversy subsided, Elijah was packing up after a solitary practice session when Charles Langley approached him in the school parking lot. Without Mr. Holloway's protective presence, the man seemed even more imposing. "You think you've won something," Langley said, his voice low but intense. "Making a spectacle, turning this into some civil rights crusade." "I'm just trying to compete fairly," Elijah replied, keeping his voice steady. "Let me be clear," Langley continued as if Elijah hadn't spoken. "You might score a few political points, but winning won't matter. They'll never see you as one of us. Fencing has traditions that go back centuries. It's not just a sport, it's a heritage. A heritage that apparently can't survive fair competition." Elijah responded, anger finally seeping into his voice. Langley's face hardened. "Watch yourself, boy. Your mother's career hangs by a thread. One call from me." "Is that a threat, Mr. Langley?" Elijah asked, pulling out his phone and hitting the record button conspicuously. "Because that would make an interesting addition to the story the local news is already putting together." The man's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his waiting BMW. Elijah's hand shook slightly as he saved the recording. The confrontation had rattled him more than he wanted to admit, but something else had shifted too, the realization that this fight was bigger than just his personal journey. The next morning, a reporter from the local news station called requesting an interview with the Street Swordsman, a nickname that had begun circulating online. Initially reluctant, Elijah agreed after discussing it with his mother and Mr. Holloway, who encouraged him to control the narrative. The resulting story ran on the evening news and quickly spread online. It positioned Elijah not just as an underdog athlete, but as a symbol of breaking through elitist barriers in traditional sports. Clips of his matches, showing his distinctive style, contrasted with interviews of traditional coaches explaining proper technique. The juxtaposition was powerful. As public interest grew, Preston Langley, perhaps sensing the shifting spotlight, issued a surprising public challenge. A charity exhibition match between himself and Elijah before the state championships, with proceeds benefiting youth sports programs in underserved communities. "It's a trap," Tina warned when Elijah showed her the formal invitation. "He wants to humiliate you publicly, make it look like you don't deserve to be there. Or he genuinely wants to prove he's better," Naoko suggested. "Either way, refusing would look bad." "I'm not refusing," Elijah said quietly. "This is exactly what we need, a chance to show everyone what's really happening, on equal footing with all eyes watching." That afternoon, Elijah received a call from the hospital. Mr. Holloway had taken a turn for the better and was asking for him. When he arrived, he found the old man sitting up in bed, watching videos of Elijah's matches on a tablet Angela had brought him. "Getting stronger every day," Mr. Holloway said with a smile that now worked on both sides of his face. "Just in time to see you make history." "You've seen the news?" Elijah asked. "Couldn't miss it if I tried. The whole hospital's talking about the Street Swordsman." He gestured to the tablet. Been watching your progress. You've found your balance, taking Donovan's technical lessons without losing your soul. Elijah nodded. I've been thinking about your letter, about owning my origin. And now the Langley boy wants a public showdown. Mr. Holloway's eyes gleamed with something like pride. He finally knows who he is, he told Angela, who had just entered carrying coffee. He's ready. The morning of the exhibition duel dawned clear and cool. The venue, Westbrook Preparatory's main gymnasium, was symbolic in itself. This was where Elijah had first been told, "Black kids don't fence," nearly a year ago, where he'd retrieved his first broken foil from the trash. Now he was returning as a headliner, with local news covering the event and bleachers filled beyond capacity. Elijah arrived early with his mother and Tina, who had delayed her MIT departure by 2 days to be present. The transformation of the gym was striking. Professional fencing strips had been installed, surrounded by temporary seating and lighting rigs for the cameras. A large scoreboard displayed both fencers' names with "Charity Exhibition" flashing across the top. Quite the production, Angela observed, squeezing Elijah's hand. You nervous? Not about the fencing, he admitted. Just all this. He gestured to the growing crowd and media setup. In the preparation area, Elijah found a locker with his name on it, containing a brand new uniform in his size, a courtesy from the event organizers. After a moment's hesitation, he set it aside and unpacked his own equipment, the patched jacket and well-worn mask that had carried him this far. Across the room, Preston was already dressed in gleaming white, surrounded by a small entourage, including a personal coach and his father, who pointedly ignored Elijah's presence. As the start time approached, the gymnasium filled to capacity. The crowd was noticeably divided, Westbrook families and traditional fencing supporters on one side, while the other side featured a more diverse group, including many who had never attended a fencing event before but had been drawn by Elijah's story. A surprise awaited at the entrance. Mr. Holloway arrived in a wheelchair pushed by a hospital aide, against medical advice but with a special day pass. The sight of him sent a murmur through the crowd and brought a lump to Elijah's throat. Couldn't miss this, the old man said gruffly when Elijah rushed over. Just focus on the fight. I'll be right here. As the lights dimmed for the introductions, 2 commentators took their positions at a small desk near the main strip. The lead commentator, a former collegiate champion, began with what seemed like carefully rehearsed impartiality that quickly revealed its bias. Today we have an interesting contrast in styles, he explained to the audience. Preston Langley represents the pinnacle of classical training, discipline, control, and proper technique, while his opponent brings a more unorthodox approach, explosive but often unpredictable. Tina, sitting beside Naoko in the front row, muttered, "Unpredictable means he can't anticipate Elijah's moves to help Preston." Exactly, Naoko agreed. Notice how they frame Preston's advantages as skill and Elijah's as just physical attributes. Classic microaggression in sports commentary. The duel was structured as best of 3 rounds, each to 5 points. As the fencers took their positions for the first round, the contrast in their demeanors was striking. Preston moved with practiced confidence, his salute textbook perfect. Elijah stood more loosely, eyes focused behind his mask as he centered himself in the moment. "On guard," the referee called. "Ready? Fence." Preston attacked immediately, his advance swift and technically flawless. Elijah parried but found his counter strangely ineffective. The referee called a halt, citing improper foot position before his riposte could land. Similar patterns repeated throughout the first round. When the exchanges were clear, Elijah held his own, but in close or simultaneous actions, the judgments consistently favored Preston. The round ended 5-2 in Preston's favor, with the Westbrook side of the gymnasium erupting in applause. As Elijah returned to his corner, he caught Mr. Holloway's gaze. The old man made a subtle gesture they had practiced for years, a reminder to observe, adapt, and control the rhythm rather than forcing his attacks. During the break, Tina slipped over to Elijah. "They're calling every technical rule against you and ignoring Preston's errors. The online chat is going crazy about it." "It doesn't matter," Elijah replied, taking a deep breath. I see the pattern now. When round 2 began, Elijah's approach had visibly changed. Rather than trying to match Preston's textbook advances, he shifted to a more defensive posture, inviting attacks while maintaining slightly greater distance than conventional. Preston, perhaps overconfident from his first-round victory, pressed forward aggressively. This time, when he attacked, Elijah didn't attempt to counter immediately, but retreated just enough to make Preston overextend, then struck with precise timing that even the biased referee couldn't dispute. "What is Reed doing?" the commentator wondered aloud. "This looks almost like classical countertime, but with a very unusual distance management." Point by point, Elijah built his lead, forcing Preston to chase him and make increasingly desperate attacks. The final point came when Preston, frustrated by Elijah's elusiveness, launched a running attack that left him vulnerable when Elijah sidestepped and tagged him with a perfectly timed counter. Round 2 went to Elijah, 5-3. The gymnasium's atmosphere shifted noticeably. The Westbrook side grew quieter, while cheers from Elijah's supporters grew louder. As the fencers prepared for the deciding round, a tournament official approached the referee and whispered something. Charles Langley was visible at the edge of the strip, his expression stone-faced. During the brief intermission, a sideline reporter approached Elijah for a quick interview. "You've adapted impressively after the first round. What changed in your approach?" Elijah removed his mask, his face calm despite the adrenaline. "I remembered why I started fencing. It wasn't about winning trophies or gaining approval. It was about finding a space where I could express myself through this incredible sport." He glanced toward the stands. "Every kid deserves that chance, no matter where they come from or what they look like." The crowd's response was immediate, a wave of applause that seemed to catch even the organizers off guard. Online viewership numbers displayed on a side screen showed a sudden spike as the interview circulated on social media. When round 3 began, the tension was palpable. Preston's initial composure had cracked, his movements betraying a new urgency. Both fencers scored early points, bringing the match to 2-2, then 3-3. After a particularly close exchange that the referee awarded to Preston despite protests from Elijah's supporters, Tina noticed something troubling. The referee had leaned toward Charles Langley before making his call, receiving what appeared to be instructions. "They're communicating," she whispered to Naoko, capturing the interaction with her phone. "The ref is getting directions from Langley." Naoko's eyes narrowed. "Send me that clip," she said, pulling out her own phone. As a highly ranked competitor with a substantial following, her social media carried weight in the fencing community. Within minutes, Naoko had posted not only the clip of the biased officiating, but also her own analysis of Preston's previous tournament brackets, showing the statistical improbability of his consistently favorable draws. "Fair fencing," she tagged it, and the hashtag began trending almost immediately. On the strip, unaware of the digital storm brewing, Elijah and Preston battled to 4-4. The decisive point would determine not just the exhibition, but perhaps the future direction of the conversation around inclusion in the sport. Preston, feeling the pressure, abandoned his calculated approach for a desperate all-out attack. Elijah, rather than retreating, stepped into the advance with perfect timing. Their blades connected in a textbook parry, but what followed was pure Elijah. A riposte executed with such precision and unexpected angle that Preston's blade was knocked from his hand, clattering to the floor in the sudden silence of the gymnasium. The disarm wasn't a legal point in itself, but in the moment of Preston's shock, Elijah completed the action with a touch to the valid target area. The scoring light flashed. Elijah had won. For a heartbeat, the gymnasium remained absolutely silent. Then, like a dam breaking, the crowd erupted. Remarkably, the cheers came not just from Elijah's supporters, but from portions of the Westbrook side as well, students and parents who recognized the beauty of what they had just witnessed. Preston stood frozen for a moment before slowly removing his mask. His face reflected a complex mix of emotions, humiliation, anger, but also something like reluctant respect. He approached for the customary handshake, and Elijah met him halfway. "Good match," Elijah said quietly. Preston nodded stiffly. "You, too." He hesitated, then added almost inaudibly, "Sorry about my father." As media swarmed the strip and charity organizers announced the record donation amounts, Elijah made his way through the crowd to where Mr. Holloway waited, tears glistening in the old man's eyes. "I had the best teacher," Elijah said, kneeling beside the wheelchair. "No," Mr. Holloway replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You had the courage to trust yourself. That's something no one can teach." In his hospital room later that evening, Mr. Holloway watched the Duel replay on the local news, laughing and pointing out details to Angela, who had brought dinner for both of them. "That kid just rewrote the book," he said softly as the camera showed Elijah's final victorious moment, "and made sure no one can ever close it again." The morning after the exhibition duel, Elijah woke to find his phone flooded with notifications. Overnight, the video of his match against Preston had gone viral, spreading far beyond fencing circles. Sports commentators were discussing it on morning shows, social media buzzed with clips of the final disarm, and 3 national newspapers had contacted him for interviews. "This is insane," he muttered, scrolling through the messages. One text from Tina stood out. "Flight leaves at 2 p.m. Come say goodbye, bringing something for you." Despite his fatigue from the previous day, Elijah dressed quickly and headed to Tina's house. Her father's car was already packed with suitcases for the drive to the airport. "The conquering hero arrives," Tina said with a grin when she opened the door. "Your face is everywhere this morning." "Don't remind me," Elijah replied. "I'm still trying to process everything." In her room, surrounded by empty shelves and packed boxes, Tina handed him a small flash drive. "I made this for you. It has all the analytics I've built from watching hundreds of your matches, timing patterns, strategic evaluations, everything. Plus a custom training program based on your specific metrics." Elijah turned the tiny device in his palm. "You've been planning this." "Well, I knew I wouldn't be here for nationals, so..." She shrugged, but her eyes betrayed her emotion. "It's not the same as having me courtside yelling statistics at you, but it's something." "It's everything," Elijah said, pulling her into a hug. "MIT doesn't know how lucky they are." Tina's departure left a palpable gap in Elijah's support system. With Mr. Holloway still in recovery and Coach Donovan noticeably absent since the exhibition controversy, Elijah found himself training alone again. This time, however, he approached his solitude differently, not as an outsider forced to the margins, but as a fighter making a deliberate choice to forge his own path. Using Tina's analytics system on his laptop, he reviewed his performance, data, and designed training sessions that blended technical precision with his natural instincts. He incorporated elements from Donovan's drills, but adapted them to suit his style, creating a hybrid approach that felt authentic. His footwork evolved during these solo sessions, becoming more fluid while maintaining the unexpected timing that had become his signature. Without anyone watching, he experimented boldly, developing moves that blended street-learned reflexes with classical precision. At home, Angela had undergone her own transformation. After successfully clearing her name at the hospital, with help from documentation Tina had gathered linking the records tampering to Charles Langley's influence, she had become more vocal about supporting underprivileged youth in sports. "The hospital is starting a scholarship program for kids interested in sports medicine," she told Elijah one evening. "They asked me to help coordinate it." Her eyes sparkled with purpose. "Funny how things come full circle, isn't it? All those hours I spent worrying about you wasting time with fencing, and now here I am, helping other kids find their passion." 2 weeks before nationals, while training at the community center that had offered him free practice space since the exhibition match, Elijah was surprised to see Naoko walk in, equipment bag slung over her shoulder. "Thought you might want a training partner," she said matter-of-factly, "unless you prefer talking to yourself." Their training sessions quickly became daily occurrences. Naoko's technical precision complemented Elijah's creativity, each pushing the other to new levels. Despite their different backgrounds, they found common ground in their dedication to the sport and their desire to change it from within. "I used to think fencers like you were diluting the sport," Naoko admitted during a water break. "Non-club trained, unconventional style, I thought it was disrespectful to tradition." "What changed?" Elijah asked. "Watching you fence. seeing how you honor the core of the sport while bringing something new to it. She adjusted her grip on her water bottle. Also, realizing how much energy the establishment puts into keeping people out. That's never a good sign. Their partnership deepened as nationals approached, evolving into a friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They developed combination drills that neither could have created alone, preparing not just for individual competition, but for changing perceptions. Meanwhile, the fallout from the exhibition duel continued to ripple through the fencing world. Under public pressure, the Regional Fencing Board launched an investigation into Charles Langley's influence. Evidence of his manipulation of brackets and officiating, much of it compiled by Tina before her departure, led to his suspension from all official positions. Without his father's protection, Preston faced scrutiny over his previous tournament results. The pressure proved too much. 3 days before Nationals, he announced his withdrawal from competition and issued a brief public apology to Elijah for actions that undermined the integrity of the sport. The news sparked mixed feelings in Elijah. "I never wanted to drive him out," he told Mr. Holloway during a therapy session at the rehabilitation center. "I just wanted fair competition." "Some people can't handle fair," Mr. Holloway replied. His speech now mostly restored, though he still relied on a walker for mobility. "They've been swimming with weights on others for so long, they don't know how to race when everyone starts." At the same line. The day before they were scheduled to leave for Nationals in Chicago, Elijah received an unexpected call from the tournament director. Mr. Holloway had been cleared by his doctors to travel and had requested accreditation as Elijah's official coach. "Are you sure you're up for this?" Elijah asked when he visited later that day. "Try and stop me," the old man replied with a grin. "I started this journey with you. I'm damn well going to see it finished." The national championship venue was unlike anything Elijah had experienced before. A vast convention center transformed into a fencing arena, with 20 strips running simultaneously and hundreds of competitors from across the country. Camera crews from sports networks roamed the floor, many seeking interviews with the street swordsman, whose story had captivated audiences. Despite his growing fame, Elijah felt strangely calm as he warmed up for his first match. Mr. Holloway sat nearby in his wheelchair, Angela beside him. Across the hall, Naoko prepared for her own division with occasional glances toward Elijah. "Nervous?" Mr. Holloway asked as Elijah stretched. "No." Elijah realized with surprise that it was true. "For the first time, I feel like I belong here, not because they've accepted me, but because I've earned my place." His early matches confirmed this confidence was well-founded. Elijah moved through the preliminary rounds with focused precision, his unique style now refined and purposeful. Other competitors, who had once viewed him with skepticism, now approached him between matches to exchange techniques and training ideas. "We've all seen your videos," one rival joked after a particularly intense bout. "Don't go easy on us just because we're classically trained." As the tournament progressed, a curious dynamic emerged. Rather than trying to distance themselves from the controversial newcomer, other fencers began adopting elements of Elijah's style, his unpredictable timing, his adaptive footwork. The rigid boundaries between traditional and street fencing were beginning to blur. The day before the finals, as Elijah was reviewing footage of potential opponents, his phone chimed with a news alert. The National Fencing Board had announced a formal investigation into systemic bias in competition structures and officiating, a direct result of the controversy surrounding Elijah's journey and Naoko's public stance. They're suspending Charles Langley from all national positions pending the investigation, Naoko told him when they met for dinner that evening. His son's credibility is in question too. All those years of privileged treatment are finally catching up to them. The news about Preston affected Elijah more deeply than he had expected. That night, he received a text from an unknown number. "Withdrew because I couldn't face you again, knowing how the system was rigged in my favor. I'm sorry for what my father did. Good luck tomorrow. You deserve to be there more than I ever did." Preston Elijah stared at the message for a long time before responding simply, "Thank you. I hope you find your way back to fencing someday, on fair terms." The morning of the finals brought an unexpected sight. As Elijah entered the arena with Mr. Holloway and Angela, he spotted a familiar figure near the entrance. Mr. Holloway's physical therapist helping him transition from the wheelchair to a walker. "What are you doing?" Elijah asked, alarmed. "Making a statement," Mr. Holloway replied, his voice firm despite the effort it took him to stand. "If you're facing the best in the country today, you deserve a coach who can stand with you, not just sit on the sidelines." Together, they walked slowly to the preparation area, drawing glances and whispers from spectators who recognized them from news coverage. When Elijah turned to help Mr. Holloway into a chair, the old man straightened his back and saluted him formally, fencer to fencer, teacher to student. Elijah's eyes filled with tears as he returned the salute. No words were needed. Everything that mattered had already been said through months of shared struggle and triumph. The tournament bracket had positioned Elijah against the reigning national champion in the finals, Alexei Petrov, a disciplined and efficient fencer whose family had emigrated from Eastern Europe when he was young. Unlike many of Elijah's previous opponents, Petrov showed no disdain for his unconventional background, only professional interest. "Your disarm against Langley was impressive," he told Elijah during equipment check. "I look forward to seeing what else you bring to the strip." The final match drew the largest crowd of the tournament. Sports networks positioned cameras around the strip. Commentators discussed Elijah's unlikely journey, and social media buzzed with live updates. In the front row, Mr. Holloway sat between Angela and Naoko, who had finished third in her division. Earlier that day, as Elijah and Petrov saluted each other, the arena fell silent. Then the referee's command broke the spell. "On guard! Ready! Fence!" The match immediately proved to be unlike any Elijah had faced before. Petrov combined textbook precision with creative adaptability, answering Elijah's unconventional moves, with equally unexpected counters. The points alternated between them, 1-0, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, neither able to gain a significant lead. Unlike previous matchups where Elijah had faced either rigid traditionalists or undisciplined talents, Petrov represented the ideal synthesis of both approaches. Each exchange became a conversation between equals, a chess match at lightning speed. By the midpoint of the match, the score stood at 7-7. Both fencers were breathing heavily, sweat visible through their masks. The crowd watched in rapt attention as each point unfolded with dramatic intensity. "He's mirroring your tempo changes," Mr. Holloway advised during a brief break. "Try the alley sequence, the one we developed before all this started." Elijah nodded, remembering the move they had practiced countless times on the cracked concrete. Behind his house, long before sponsors or cameras or national attention. When the match resumed, the score climbed to 14-14. The next point would determine the national champion. The arena held its collective breath as the fencers took their positions. Petrov had been controlling the pace of the previous exchanges, forcing Elijah to respond to his initiative. This time, Elijah relaxed his stance slightly, appearing to retreat as Petrov advanced. The champion, sensing victory, pressed forward, with confident precision. At the last possible moment, Elijah executed a feint retreat, then exploded forward with the same distinctive move he had first developed in that alley months ago, a combination of classical parry and street-learned reflexes that carried him past Petrov's guard. The scoring light flashed. The arena erupted. Elijah Reed, the backyard fencer who had been told black kids don't fence, had just become the national champion. The moment Elijah's winning point registered, the arena exploded into a standing ovation. Cameras flashed from every angle as he removed his mask, his expression one of stunned joy. Commentators struggled to be heard over the roar of the crowd, describing the final move as revolutionary and a perfect fusion of classical technique and innovative instinct. Petrov approached with genuine respect, offering his hand in a bow of acknowledgement. "Brilliant adaptation," he said. "You've earned this completely." As officials prepared for the medal ceremony, media representatives swarmed around the strip, each seeking the first interview with the unexpected champion. Elijah spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Jenny Williams from the Wilson High newspaper, who had interviewed him for a small piece about unusual student hobbies back when no one else had shown interest in his fencing. "Jenny," he called. gesturing her forward past the professional reporters. "You get the first interview." Her eyes widened with surprise as she fumbled with her notebook. Really? But all these big networks were nowhere to be found when this journey started. Elijah finished for her. "You were." In the interview, Elijah spoke not just about the match, but about the barriers he had faced and the support that had carried him through. Mr. Holloway's mentorship, Tina's technical genius, Nyoko's alliance, and his mother's unwavering faith. "This isn't just my victory," he concluded, glancing toward Mr. Holloway, who watched proudly from nearby. "It belongs to everyone who's ever been told they don't belong in a space they love." The days following Nationals brought a whirlwind of attention. Sports magazines requested cover features, talk shows extended invitations, and social media celebrated his victory as a watershed moment for inclusivity in traditional sports. But amid the chaos, Elijah remained grounded, returning to school and maintaining his training routine. 3 weeks after his return, Elijah received an unexpected package from MIT. Inside was a letter from Tina, along with a formal research paper she had submitted to her program, Algorithmic Analysis of Bias in Athletic Scoring Systems, a case study in competitive fencing. Her work had caught the attention of faculty members, who had connected her with a sports technology incubator. The attached note explained, "Elijah, they're funding development of our training software. Remember the system we cobbled together with sensors and my old laptop? It's becoming a real platform for athletes without access to elite coaching. You're officially listed as co-creator. Hope that's okay. Can't wait to see what you do next. You changed more than just fencing." Tina. The recognition of Tina's brilliance felt like a completion of their shared journey. That evening, Elijah called to congratulate her, and they spent hours discussing possibilities for expanding access to sports traditionally limited by economic and social barriers. Meanwhile, Nyoko approached Elijah with a proposition of her own. Her family's influence in the fencing world, combined with his growing platform, created an opportunity to establish a scholarship program for young fencers from underrepresented backgrounds. "We could call it Open Stance," she suggested as they sketched the outline during lunch break. "Providing equipment, training, and competition fees for kids who would otherwise never get the chance. Like a fencing underground, but above board and properly funded," Elijah added, already envisioning the possibility of finding others like himself, kids with natural talent but no pathway into the sport. Their initiative gained immediate support from unexpected quarters. Former competitors, impressed by Elijah's sportsmanship and skill, offered to serve as visiting coaches. Equipment manufacturers donated starter kits. Even some traditionally exclusive clubs opened their doors for program participants. Angela's contribution to this new landscape came through her hospital connections. At a community health fair, she was honored with an advocacy award for her work developing youth wellness programs that included sports exposure for children from low-income neighborhoods. "I never imagined standing on a stage talking about fencing," she told Elijah afterward, smoothing her award certificate. "But watching you fight for your place taught me something important about believing in our kids, even when the world doesn't." As Angela found her voice as an advocate, Charles Langley faced the consequences of his actions. The investigation into his conduct revealed years of manipulation and favoritism, forcing his resignation from all positions of influence in the fencing world. He withdrew from public view, his reputation permanently tarnished. Elijah felt no satisfaction in Langley's downfall, only a somber recognition of how deeply entrenched such attitudes remained in many institutions. The work of transformation had only begun. One afternoon, Elijah received an unexpected invitation to speak at Westbrook Preparatory, the same school where he'd been dismissed a year earlier. He accepted without hesitation, recognizing the symbolic importance of returning not as an outsider but as a respected guest. Walking the hallways that had once seemed so forbidding, Elijah carried himself with quiet confidence. The same display cases that had intimidated him now held a flyer announcing his visit. In the gymnasium where he had once been told, "Black kids don't fence," he now demonstrated techniques for a diverse group of students whose eyes reflected the same hunger for belonging he had once felt. After the demonstration, the school's fencing Coach, not the same one who had dismissed him, approached with an unexpected request. "We'd like to establish a partnership with your Open Stance program," he said. "Our facilities in exchange for your perspective. These kids need to learn there's more than one path to excellence." That evening, Elijah visited Mr. Holloway, who had returned home from rehabilitation and was gradually regaining his independence. The old man had been following Elijah's post-championship journey with evident pride, collecting newspaper clippings and printouts of online articles in a scrapbook. "I have something for you," Elijah said, removing the gold medal from his pocket. "This belongs to you as much as me." Mr. Holloway shook his head firmly. "You earned it. But more importantly, you earned something better. You made sure no one else has to earn it alone." The medal remained with Elijah, but he understood Mr. Holloway's point. The true victory wasn't the championship itself, but the doors it had opened for others. In the months that followed, those doors continued to widen. The National Fencing Association adopted new policies to address bias in officiating and broaden participation. Regional tournaments saw an influx of first-generation fencers inspired by Elijah's story. Coaches began incorporating elements of his adaptive style into traditional training. On a warm spring afternoon, almost exactly a year after he had first found that broken foil in the Westbrook dumpster, Elijah returned to the alley behind his house. This time, he wasn't alone. A small group of neighborhood kids had gathered to watch him demonstrate basic fencing moves, their eyes wide with the same wonder he had once felt watching those Olympic videos. One boy, no more than 10 years old, clutched a wooden stick he had shaped to resemble a foil. His stance was awkward but determined as he attempted to mimic Elijah's movements. "Like this?" he asked, executing a clumsy but earnest lunge. "That's perfect," Elijah encouraged him. "You've got the right instinct. The rest we can teach." Later, that evening, Elijah stood in his bedroom, contemplating the wall that had become a timeline of his journey. His original cracked foil hung beside competition photos, newspaper clippings, and his championship medal. He lifted his mask, no longer patched with electrical tape, but still bearing the small LED accents Tina had added, and placed it over his face. In the mirror, he saw not just his own reflection, but echoes of everyone who had made this journey possible. Mr. Holloway's wisdom, his mother's strength, Tina's brilliance, Nyoko's alliance, and countless others who had either helped or hindered along the way. "Now, they see me," he said quietly to his reflection. But the words meant something different than they once would have. It wasn't about being noticed anymore. It was about being visible in a way that made others see themselves as possible, champions too. He set the mask down gently and turned away from the mirror. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Training sessions with Open Stance participants, meetings about expanding the program, preparation for defending his title at next year's nationals. The journey hadn't ended with that championship point. In many ways, it had just begun. Have you ever wondered what barriers might fall if we stopped telling children what they can't become? Elijah's journey from invisible boy to champion reminds us that talent defies expectation when given the chance to breathe. Like and subscribe for more stories that challenge what we think we know about possibility.